Welcome back. I'll tell you in a minute, Phil. Welcome back to the show. Honestly, I have to feed in the answers sometimes. Lots of questions coming through and some good ones as well. And, you know, I've been stunned by some of the answers from our chief today. Banging in the Winners has tweeted, #scared. We've seen it with you now, Phil. You're scared of McManus. You're scared of Gordon Elliott, who wouldn't be. He's a big lad. Right, banging in the Winners. Regal Encore hasn't been handicapped yet. Of course, this is another McManus chaser. Was quite a decent hurdler, very good bumper horse. You were quick enough to handicap Manella Rocco, says Banging in the Winners. What about Regal Encore?
OK, Regal Encore, 145 hurdler, runs at Chepstow, gets beaten 14 lengths. We've got him performing to 129. Then gets beaten at Utoxeter. We've got him performing to 123. Falls at Kempton, obviously 0. Then he wins at Plumpton, and we've got him on 144. So we'd like to have another look at him, because we're still not sure about him. But we have him not published on 144 at the moment. It's £1 lower than his hurdle mark. If Connections said we want a rating, we'd give them 144, but we haven't published anything.
Oh, how generous of you. What, just to give him his hurdles rating, just like that?
No, £1 less.
Oh, well, that'll make all the difference
on 144. So we give him 144. We'd like to see him run in another novice chase to get more of an idea on him, because sometimes you know, in small run novice chases it is very difficult to get an absolute angle on horses. So if we were pushed, we'd give him 144, but in the meantime, let's see what he does. If they want to enter in the handicap, that's what he'd get. If they want to run in a novice chase, let's have another look at him.
So let's make this absolutely clear, Phil. What you're saying is you would like JP McManus to give you more clues, and once he's given you more clues, you will give him a different rating. Are you really thinking that's going to happen?
It depends on what the horse does. If the horse finishes beaten 95 lengths, the answer is no, we won't give him any.
With JP's handicappers in general, have you found that he is very generous when giving you clues about how good they are?
Sometimes he is and sometimes he isn't.
Tony the Tyke's been on his last visit. He says, Phil, you said you would drop older horses quicker. Will you be giving back £7 to Tullamore Dew?
Absolutely not, but I'll tell you something about Tullamore Dew. He's proves a number of points and he's a very interesting horse. First of all, he was a horse that used to be 131 and dribbled his way down to 118 again. A horse that during when he was 13, we dropped and we dropped and we dropped, and eventually became 118. He moved yards, and we were talking before about horses that move yards can very often rekindle their enthusiasm, get their form back. I'm not saying a 14-year-old or 13-year-old is going to improve, but Tullamore Dew, when he moved to Mickey Hammond, won at Cartmel off 118. We put him to 126. He then ran disappointingly at Carlisle. Probably if he was a 7 or an 8-year-old, we'd have left him on 126. But because of his age, 13 at the time, we dropped him a couple back to 124. He then goes to Carlisle, wins by 12 lengths at Carlisle off 124. 13-year-old, right? And I moved him to 135. He runs in the Veterans final, probably one of the most competitive handicap chases we've had in the last 3 months, the other day. And again, he runs disappointingly off 135. Again, if he was a 7 or an 8-year-old, I'd leave him on 135. I've dropped him back to 132.
Right. OK.
Happy with that?
Relatively happy.
So happy that we've got a 13-year-old that's won twice this year?
Very happy.
Good.
I had a very interesting chat with Dr. Richard Newland, someone you should have a chat with sometime, about horses and their performances and the age thing. And as far as I can work out, there's no medical reason why a horse aged 13, 12, 14 shouldn't be able to run to a very reasonable level of its best ability, provided it's had no issues. And it's the issues factor that comes into these horses. Most of the horses that deteriorate for a reason. But if your horse is fit and well and hasn't ever had a tendon problem or a back problem or whatever problem the horses have, there is no reason why it can't keep running.
And I 90% agree with that. First, the other thing I would add to it is I think they lose their speed, but they don't lose their stamina.
Yeah.
So you often find 12, 13-year-old 3-milers can still perform really well. There aren't too many 11, 12, 13-year-old 2-milers around, and those that are struggle.
So technically, if Tullamore Dew was entered in a 2-mile chase, you could drop in £10.
Well, I
right?
couldn't because that's the trainer's incompetence if you ran him in a 2-mile race, and we wouldn't give pounds off for incompetence.
No. The Silver Ring have tweeted, I didn't like the way you looked at me when you said that word either. Looking at Phil's...
You don't train it.
No, but it was the look that I was worried about, not whether I trained it or not. Looking at Phil's performance figures, this is a really good question. As opposed to official ratings, how badly out of form is the Paul Nicholls yard, if at all? Now, that is a good question. Are the horses simply running to their ratings, but not good enough, or are they running below their ratings?
It's probably a mixture, I'd say. It's something I've not studied. I haven't, gone through all of the performance figures of all of his horses. But clearly, some of the horses perhaps are not as good as they once were. Some of the horses perhaps haven't run particularly well. Maybe he just hasn't got quite as good horses. Maybe he's got lots of young horses who are on the way up. But it's not something that I've studied, so it would be difficult to give a hard and fast comment on them. But I don't think that they're running abysmally. Okay. They're just not winning. Because you have somebody who's been so incredibly successful, as soon as he doesn't actually win the race, people are on his case, which is incredibly harsh, I think. His horses actually, most of them have run tolerably well. They just haven't won as often, perhaps, as they might have done in previous years.
Damien says, why don't amended marks come in immediately and horses are allowed to run before their assessed mark applies?
So what you're saying is a horse runs on a Monday and we reassess it on a Tuesday?
Yeah.
Well, then it would just be absolutely impossible. The amount of racing that there is in Britain is such that we just would never be able to do things on that, that sort of amount of racing. So think in the summer where you've got 6 meetings and something like nearly 50 races on a particular day, to expect us to turn those round in seconds is just not on. We're trying to give a good service here where people are confident that our handicap marks are fair. We absolutely don't want to be guessing, and if we had to turn things round in 24 hours, there'd be some guesswork involved, and I'd be against that. And
do you think the Diamond King connections are confident that you've done that?
Diamond King will be competitive when he runs in England off 144.
Scared. Right, Dean, these are the kind of tweets we love because we try and mix a little bit of entertainment because it can become very dull, this kind of show. And well, it can, figures and things like that can become very dull, and try and do it in a way that makes it quite interesting. He's thoroughly enjoying discussing top chases with Phil Smith. Ask Andrew. Love it. He says, I'm learning a lot. I'm not going to read that one out. It's silly, but it's good. Right. Has Phil any numbers to hand for the difference between Irish handicappers for Cheltenham that get put up in weights either up or down? Let's just go back in history here. There was a time when the Irish would come to Cheltenham and they'd be chucked in, and you stopped them.
Stop them being chucked in?
Yes, you changed the system, didn't you? So that you said, OK, the Irish handicappers aren't doing their job right.
No, we never said that.
But that's what you meant. You didn't actually, of course, say it, but of course that's what you meant, because then you introduced your own handicapping system, and you could only have meant that they're not doing their job right by introducing your own ratings for Irish horses, because effectively what you were saying is you are not handicapping your horses correctly, so I am going to do it for you. However, let's forget about that point where clearly you are going to fob off the reality of the situation. But now, how much do you think the Irish handicappers are well in or badly in?
Well, we keep our own Irish performance figures.
Is that tough? Is that tough?
It varies. Well, tough doing it. So it's extra work, so it'd be preferable not to have it. But to try and produce accurate, competitive, compelling, equal handicaps, we have to. And that's not because of incompetence or competence. It's to do with the fact that we've got 2 completely different systems. And we've been around the reasons for that, a number of occasions in the past. The one thing I would say, to try and be helpful to your questioner, is there's a much greater differential the lower the ability level. So if we have a horse that's coming with an Irish rating, let's say 82, by and large, we might have that 8 or even £10 higher over here. If we have a horse that's coming here off 139, say, we might have that on 141, 142. It's the higher you go, the differential is much smaller.
Can I ask a question? Willie Mullins, we know, has this terrible record for Willie Mullins in handicaps over here. Do you you know, his record in handicap chases is terrible, isn't it? It's like...
Well, his record in handicap hurdles isn't bad because he wins one every year at Cheltenham.
OK, he wins one. But in general terms, his record in handicaps has been appalling over the... you know, it's a terrible record. He hardly ever win. Do the Mullins horses immediately get more weight, do you think?
Absolutely not. We don't...
I'll get his record in front of me so that we're not talking blind here, but it is terrible.
Hang on, are you suggesting I'm scared of Mullins as well?
Well, I think what we've established today, Phil, is that you probably shudder every time you take a step.
Well, first of all, with Willie Mullins, he's got a perfectly acceptable overall strike rate in handicaps in Britain. You know, he wins a handicap at the Cheltenham Festival every year. If you could guarantee to every top trainer they'd win a handicap at Cheltenham every year, they'd bite your hand off.
But he's not every trainer, is he? He's Willie Mullins.
Yeah, but his horses are only entitled to an equal chance, the same as everyone else is. Whoever the trainer is, they're still only entitled to an equal chance.
GB Jumps, take this. 4 from 102 in handicaps over the last 5 years. That's 4 from 53 in hurdles, 9 from 47 in novices. That's as far as hurdles are concerned. 4 from 102. And in chases, over the last 5 years, handicap chases, 0 from 49. On that bombshell, we'll talk about this afterwards. You think he's doing it well in handicap? 0 from 49. What's happening to Mullins' horse is clearly handicapped out of it. We'll be back.